Hey folks, it's Ray Latif for Taste Radio, and right now I am honored to be sitting down with Jamie Bissonnette and Kenta Katagai, chefs in Boston who have prepared some of the most delicious food that I've eaten in a long time. Jamie, how are you?
Awesome, man. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Kenta, how are you?
Good.
Thank you so much again for having me at Temple Records for an amazing dinner about a week ago. It was a Basque-inspired omakase dinner, which was among the best I've had in a long time. And let me tell you something. I was in San Sebastian a year ago, and some of the food that I ate last week rivaled what I ate in 2024. So thank you again. Before we get into that dinner, I'd love to talk to you both a bit about your backgrounds. Jamie, you are, dare I say, a bit of a legend here in the Boston area, a very well-known chef, been a very high-profile person in the restaurant industry for about 2 decades, beginning with one of my favorite restaurants, or at least from what I remember, Eastern Standard, when it was originally in Kenmore Square, and you were cooking up some very audacious cuisine. But talk a bit about your history as a chef in Boston.
Sure. I moved to Boston in the late 90s. I worked for Legal Seafood first and got to work with a kitchen manager who became their director named Rich Volante, who really taught me a lot and gave me a lot of confidence. I had done some work with Jasper White over the years, and then I ended up working at a bunch of great restaurants, eventually landing at Mark Orfali's Pigalle, where we get to really dig into French regional cuisine. And from there, catapulted a couple of years later, joined up with Garrett Harker, and we opened up Eastern Standard. There was a lot of other restaurants along the way, but that's the short of it. That's the checkered story.
Kenta, I'm actually relatively new to you. I'm not familiar with your history as a chef, but based on what I ate last week, I am a fan, so to speak. And I'd love to hear from you about how you got into this business and your work at sushi at Temple Records.
Well, I just moved to Boston last year, so I only
Okay.
been in Boston for a year. And before that, I was in Hawaii. And while I was in Hawaii, I was there for almost 12 years. And I really wanted to come back to East Coast. I used to live in New York and DC. And DC is the place I started working in a restaurant. I started being in this industry. And that's where I started learning all Japanese cuisine and sushi, and etc. And while I was in Hawaii, I really wanted to come back to East Coast again. And I met Chef Jamie and Babak and Andy, and they brought me here.
And that's all she wrote. I mean, it sounds like the partnership has really worked out well. The restaurant that we were at, or that I was at last week, is called Temple Records, which is a pretty unique concept, I would say. It has a music element, obviously, to it. It has a food element. The sushi bar is downstairs. There's another concept upstairs as well. How did this all come together, Jamie? I mean, what? Again, it's a very differentiated type of restaurant than what people are typically seeing these days.
Yeah, it sure is, man. So a couple of years ago, I had been a partner in a restaurant group for about 18 years, and we had a bunch of restaurants all over the globe, New York, Dubai, Bangkok, and then a lot in Boston. And my business partner and I decided it was time to go chase our own creative outlets in different ways. And what that turned into was me leaving the group, selling my shares, and taking some time off to figure out what I wanted to do. And Andy and Babek have just been my friends for a long time. Andy and I worked together in West Hartford, Connecticut for Billy Grant back in the 90s. And we've always just been wicked good friends. So we started talking about the possibility of doing a project together. A couple things came up. We looked at it, we passed. And then this property was presented to us. And it was really appealing, like logistically, and it was so unique. And to take one spot where we put Somek, the landlord said, we want you to take this part of the basement and this storage space next door. So we opened it all up, combined the three places together, and it didn't make sense to open up one concept that would have so many doors and stairs to go room to room. So we thought, okay, let's open up Somak, a very traditional non-fusion Korean restaurant. And next to it, I wanted to put in a record bar because my wife wanted all my records out of the house. And I love record bars. I love that style. And having just spent a bunch of time in Korea and Japan, I was really inspired by a lot of the ones that I went to in Kyoto and Osaka, and a couple of the ones I went to in Seoul as well. So we decided that that's what we were going to do. And as we started like doing a little bit of the demolition of the old space and pulling back the curtains, so to speak, we went in the basement one day and Bobek said, "What do you think we should do down here? Should we do a private dining room? Blah, blah, blah. Short story longer." I said, "What if we do a sushi bar?" And he's like, "Well, wow, that would be so cool." Because going down the stairs from Temple Records into sushi at Temple Records, it felt a lot to me like going into one of like the subterranean sushi bars in Ginza, like sushi, like Ginza Iwa, for instance. So the next step was finding Kenta, which was surprisingly serendipitous, and the universe wanted us to meet, so we did. And in doing that, we wanted to keep the three concepts very unique to each other, where the collaboration of culture would be up in Temple Records, where there's some Korean food and some Japanese food. There's really no rules for the food in Temple Records. But in sushi, we wanted to do, you know, and Kenta and I were talking and ideating the menu. We really wanted it to be classic and traditional Japanese, like edome style, without the fusion that you see in America, which I love. Don't get me wrong. I think that that's really great. But Boston, in my opinion, was starting to feel like everywhere was a higher end omakase. There wasn't somewhere where you could get really great aged fish and properly cut fish and seasoned rice that wasn't tweaked with a bunch of different ingredients from other cultures. So there we had it. We decided to do all of these three concepts.
And again, the food is something that I feel like I've been missing for a long time. I think the first time I tried sushi, and this was part of the meal. It wasn't entirely a sushi meal, but the sushi that I ate at the dinner felt really special. And in a lot of ways, I feel like sushi in America has become this homogenized, blandified, to create a word, product that you just eat and you don't really enjoy. You just eat it because that's what it is and that's what your expectations for it are. And Kenta, you know, going from that baseline to what Americans have come to expect from sushi, to elevate that palate, to elevate those expectations, I think is something that you really excelled upon, particularly in that dinner. How are you attempting to reteach people, your customers, about what it means to serve and eat delicious food, particularly sushi?
Well, I'm to be honest to myself, I'm not even thinking that I'm doing anything special. I'm just doing what I've been experienced through my life in Japan and United States. And then I used to see a lot of time that my grandma was cooking. That's, I think, my baseline of my cooking experience in Japan, and from my mom and dad. And then that simply, I just wanted to share my culture with all my guests, especially with Jamie and all my staff here. And that, I think that's really special to all of the guests, all the people here. And that really make me happy. And I really appreciate that people feel the same way as I do. Yeah, that's really special to me.
Do you have to share your story? How much does your personal story impact a customer's experience when a guest walks in and they again have certain expectations for what they're going to eat, and they have a much more elevated experience, and they want to ask you about it? Does your story really resonate with them? Is it a big part of your presentation of the meal?
Well, I think so. I believe so. And they really enjoyed from what I expect, what I explain what it is. And yeah, it's something, it's over here is what I really uh try to uh communicate with guests is try to talk to them. It doesn't matter if it's about food, about my experience in Japan, my culture. Whatever I talk to them, they're very enjoyable to listen. And that makes, to me, is food taste better. Also, try to tell my other sushi chefs that just try to, talk to the guests and try to enjoy yourself. And if you enjoy yourself, people see your enjoy moment, so they enjoy yourself themselves also.
Yeah, making that connection between story and food is really important. It gives context, and I think you're right. It allows the guests to appreciate the food a bit more. Jamie, with Zurito, which is one of your newest restaurants, which is a Basque-inspired restaurant. It was a coming together of Sushi at Temple Records and Zurito to create this wonderful dinner. And again, a Basque omakase dinner isn't necessarily the most intuitive thing, but I think it came together so beautifully. But Basque food isn't necessarily, I think, as well known, perhaps, as say Spanish tapas in this country. What has been the level of education that you've had to share with people, with your guests, about Basque cuisine?
You're spot on, Ray. A lot of people, they don't know the difference, but luckily there's so much similarities because the Basque region of Spain is still part of Spain, and between Catalan food, the food of like Madrid, and then the food of Basque country, the food of Galicia, like all of the different regional things kind of sometimes get blended together in classic pincho bars and tapas bars throughout that country. So for us opening up Cerrito, we were able to kind of lean into some of the things that people know about it. In Basque, they don't use the word tapa, and in Zurito, we don't use the word tapa. But if a guest come in and says, "Oh, what's a racione? Is that like a tapa?" We'll say, "Yeah, it's like a larger tapa, exactly." What's a pincho? Well, a pincho is like one of those little tapas that you get that's on a bread or on a stick. And we are able to use that comparison to set people at ease. And I think a lot of the guests coming into the restaurant know my history of with Toro, and having run a tapas restaurant, or four of them at one point, all over the globe, that they're comfortable with it and they're putting some trust into us. And then from there, the education comes with the simplicity of the food and the simplicity of the ingredients, similarly to what Kenta is doing in sushi, because that collaboration, that fusion menu that we did for the omakase, the reason we're doing that at the omakase is because there's so little fusion involved in any of the restaurants, on a normal day to day, and we don't do omakase because we want it to, be affordable, and we don't want people to have to commit to an expensive meal. So when we decided we would do an omakase and have it be a collaboration, we decided that it would be so unique and so hyper focused on something that we don't normally do, that makes it a lot more fun for us. So the education at Zurito, to your initial question, it's been really seamless. People are comfortable and they get it. And there's like so many lateral comparisons to something that they already know.
Kenta, has your experience here in Boston been a bit different than your experiences elsewhere, in that this is a very challenging and competitive market? Are you finding that you have to take a slightly different approach to menu curation and service that is different than elsewhere?
Well, yeah, I wasn't working in this straight up Japanese sushi restaurant before.
Hmm.
So of course, when I make menu, I really focus on very traditional Japanese way. But the other restaurant I used to work is a little bit of everything. But it's traditional Japanese, but they have a fryer, so we can fry things. But down here, we don't have hotlines, so we have to create something we can do with what we have down here.
And I think one of the things that Kenta's point there, if you don't mind, Chef, is there's so many people doing so many different competitive things in the sushi world in Boston. And what Kenta, when he got here, he had the benefit of a fresh set of eyes So he didn't come in here thinking this is what restaurant X did, this is what restaurant Y did. The only time we really looked at other menus was to make sure that we weren't pricing ourselves too low or too high, and that we were being competitive in that regard. And as we've opened, what Chef Kenta-san has done down here is he just does exactly the way he thinks it should be done, in the way that he would want it done for him. And that's been really great. And it's been a struggle. It did take a while for people to start to get it. When people come in and they ask for avocado roll and we don't have any vegetarian rolls, and they want a crab avocado stick and they want salmon nigiri, and for instance, we don't have salmon. So those are some of the things that have been the challenges of, like, the fact that it is very Japanese, but then the people who've spent time going to Japan come in, they meet Kenta, they come out, and you just see these like pie-eyed people that are just like they've just gone to church for the first time and really found God, and they preach the benefits of it. And it's still catching on, which is what's really great to watch as Kenta's developing his clientele, developing his team, and developing the menu.
I think it's a gift and a curse to be different and specific and focused on what you want to serve. In that,
Like a t-shirt that says that, bro. That's exactly our everyday.
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure, as you pointed out, Jamie, you have people who walk in and say, "Hey, I want an avocado roll." And you're like, "I'd love to serve you one, but that's not what we do here." So having said that, do you have to adjust? I mean, do you have to stick to your guns, or do you feel like you have to evolve based on how the consumer perceives you, based on how the guests perceive your restaurant and your cuisine?
Yes, but not to every whim, for sure. I mean, that's the key of staying relevant, and staying, ahead of the curve. You need to modify to your clientele a little bit here and there, but you also need to your point earlier, your question about education is so important. To compare it to Zurito, just to jump across the park for a sec, we don't serve paella and some of the other more like typical things that you see in Spanish, like tapas bars and top in Spanish restaurants, because they don't really serve a lot of paella in Basque country, and we don't logistically have it, the space for it. And like that is something that we get over and over again. There's no chance that we're going to just all of a sudden knock down a wall, expand our kitchen, and buy a range and start doing paella. It just wouldn't seem right to, if a Basque person came in and they get it. So I guess to us, sticking to our guns a little bit is important, because we want to stay true to what we are, because that's, I think, what happens to a lot of the restaurants that don't do that. And I run and owned restaurants that kind of catered to every whim of every like, general trend of people asking for things. And that's fun too. And I'm not knocking it. I just think it's a nice breath of fresh air to be able to go somewhere in Boston and get, like, if a Filipino restaurant opened up and they were doing Filipino fusion food, I'm sure it would be great. But if a Filipino restaurant opened up in Boston and they were doing like a very true Filipino restaurant that's not modified to be towards the Western flip tastes, I think I would be more excited for it. And I think that's what we're doing, is we're trying to say, hey, if you want to go get an omakase that is so delicious with great cut fish, amazing rice, and then interesting like garnished ingredients, definitely go to No Relation. Go eat at Shore Leave. What Colin is doing over there is awesome. And then when Colin comes here, he's like, what I love about this is it's simple Edome style of properly aged, properly cut fish, delicious rice, wasabi, and proper soy. And like that simplicity, to me, I think is even harder sometimes.
Absolutely. You mentioned education, Jamie. I think the other aspect of this is the narrative, right? So on the one hand, you have the guest who's inside the restaurant. You can educate them there. You can cater to the experience that they want, or at least, help them understand what experience they should be getting. On the other hand, when you're outside the restaurant, you want them to come in. You're trying to pull them in, explain what you're doing, and talk about what you're doing. And that narrative now is being told by a lot of different people. It's being told by the restaurant, by your PR team, by Yelp, by influencers, and I think it's probably very, very challenging to make sure that everyone's kind of speaking in the same way. In fact, it's probably impossible. But Kenta, I think from a social media perspective, it's helpful to be able to tell that story and tell it in a very consistent way. How are you creating your own social media presence, and how are you talking about sushi at Temple Records via social and again helping to curate and talk about that narrative very consistently?
I really want to show them that I'm not doing anything special, very simple, but I really uh, care what I do and how I cut, how I treat my fish. And even the other day, I asked her to shoot my egg tamago making video. And it's very simple. Everybody thinks, oh, that looks so easy, but it's not very easy. I've been making this. It took me like 20 years to make, but still think that it's not perfect. And still need to fix a little bit here and there. But that small looks very easy, but make it look easy is not just easy. That makes sense?
Yeah,
Like,
I totally. I
yeah,
think
it's
what you I and just in the last 60 seconds, I think you articulated exactly what Sushi at Temple Records is all about, which is the simplicity of what you do, but also the quality that goes into every dish that you serve, which is, again, I think the what you're trying to share in terms of the narrative and the education behind your restaurant. Jamie, going back to the question of you have all these different sources to try to tell that story, to try to shape the narrative of your restaurants like a Zurito or Temple Records. How are you navigating all those voices all at once?
You know, consistency is key. So for us, it's taking care of our team, taking care of our staff, making sure that the people that we work with, the servers, the prep cooks, the dishwashers, et cetera, all understand we have a common goal. And so all of the servers who work in sushi know what Kenta's goals are. They know his ethos on food. They know what his vision is. So they can speak to the guests that way. And then when the guests interpret that however they want, you've got it's like philosophy. You replace a board on a boat every day for a year. There's 365 boards in that boat. When is that boat a new boat? When was it the old boat? It's up for debate. So as we look at all of the things that are being sent out there on TikTok and Instagram and any other social medias and our review platforms, you're right. People definitely get different perspectives of it. And we just got to stay true to who we are, and you'll start to see common themes. But the goal is when people leave here, if they come and they say, wow, this is such a great neighborhood sushi bar. I love being able to go in there and get a makamono and a nice, really awesome glass of sake and be in and out really quickly, versus somebody else who might come and realize that we have a really dope wine list that's really in depth with, 15 to 20 different champagnes and a lot of grower champagne and remarkable list of Chablis and white Burgundy. And then they come in and they fall out and they're like, well, we can go there and we can eat all of this really unique Japanese fish that's not available at your normal neighborhood spot. They're both experiencing what we want here because we want both of those experiences. We want people who can come in and get Norogoro and be excited for Hotaro Ika. And we also want people who can come in and be like, oh, wow, they have a spicy tuna maki and an affordable sake. And that's what not doing omakase every day, means to us, is that we can be a place where you can choose your own experience. So having people experience us in different ways and put it out there, I think just gives us more audience.
I would 100% agree. And I love the fact that it's not necessarily trying to frame what an influencer or just some regular person putting content on social media. Um, Not that an influencer isn't a regular person, but some person who is not considered an influencer, who's posting content on their social media. It's not necessarily trying to frame what they're doing, but it's very much about that consistency of what everyone is getting and making sure that they're having a good experience throughout. Chefs, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been a great conversation. You're both unquestionably good at what you do. And for listeners who are in the Boston area or visiting the Boston area, Zurito and Temple Records, just a definite must stop in the dining scene in Boston. So thank you so much again for what you do and hope to catch up again soon.
Great to have you in, man.